Everybody, welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting and analyst, longtime college, AAU, and high school coach, Mr. David Sisk. This is a breaking news podcast. As I was getting my steps Saturday morning, David sends me a text and says Luka Bogavac has committed to North Carolina. He's a 6'5" guard from Montenegro, the European player many people have been talking about for about a month now, maybe even a little bit longer. We're going to dive into his game and some other aspects of the admissions process here in a few minutes with David. Before I kick it to you, David, a couple of stats. He's going to be 22 years old in 3 months. He played at SC Derby in the Croatia League the last 2 seasons, but really exploded this past year, 14.9 points, 3.6 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 49.5% from the floor, 39.9% from three, and the three-point line is deeper in Europe than it is in college. So, David, first of all, before we talk about admissions, all that kind of stuff, your thoughts about how this played out. It's sort of resurfaced quickly here the last few days, and what kind of player Carolina's getting in Luka Bogavac.
I'm glad you didn't ask me to find Montenegro on a map. Somewhere between Korea and England, I guess. So,
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I think typical, like you said, European guard. But one thing to remember, a lot of times these guys that come out, you look at them and they're guys that are basically high school age, and they've got a long way to go in their game. And he doesn't. He's almost 22 years old. And so he's played in the Adriatic League, at the highest level. So he's played against grown men. I still don't know how you would compare that to the best players. And he, 14.6, I think it was, 14.8 points per game. But his shooting splits are very impressive. So you can either shoot the basketball or you can't. The overall field goal percentage is very doable, but really good 3-point shooter and foul shooter. So obviously he has the stroke. And let's face it, that's something that they needed. When North Carolina, I think you look at the 4-year stretch of Hubert Davis, he's had 2 teams that didn't live up to the expectations. So that was year 2 and year 4. Neither team could shoot the ball. So you're going to be looking now at, I think, a different looking guard rotation. It looks to me like he's going to be the 3, so I should say perimeter rotation. Trimble's still going to be there, but I think you look at him at the 1 spot, the 3 spot, and say, hey, this team's going to be able to, put the ball in the hole.
Yeah, in watching his film, there's several things that jump out to me. Number one, he can do a lot of stuff off the dribble. He gets assists. He can pull up and quickly shoot a 3. He's got a mid-range game, but he really gets to the basket a lot, and he doesn't waste movement. He doesn't waste space. Doesn't waste anything getting to the basket. He goes right to the rim and uses the glass a lot. But he's also someone that, because teams know he can get to the basket, he can draw defenders and he can see guys on the perimeter. And that's something that really kind of stood out to me. So there's an awareness to his game. There's an economy to his game, but also the fact that he's a guy that can dribble and do things off the dribble. That's what they needed. They needed a guy at the 3 that could force defenses to guard an entire game. And they didn't really have that. At least proven. Jonathan Powell hasn't proven that. Jaron Stevenson hasn't proven that. So they have someone now who can do that. And I think that in addition to his ability to shoot the ball, kind of fits in to what was fairly sizable hole from a structural standpoint offensively for the upcoming season.
Well, there's no doubt he's skilled and schooled, but I'm going to kick back just a tiny. I'm not disagreeing, but to play devil's advocate here, I've watched tape too, and I think I've told you this, and I've told some other people. I've talked to a lot of people about him in the last week, and when I watch tape from Europe, the one thing is they're obviously good basketball players. It's not as physical a league, but it's not nearly as athletic. So when I watch a player get to the rim over there, I'm not going to say I take it with a grain of salt, but there is an asterisk to me. And so if I watch him get to the rim in Europe, I don't know if he does that as well. I just don't know yet how that relates. I'm not going to say he can't. I'm not going to say he can. There's a question mark to me how watching a guy. Now, look, if you see somebody that's overly athletic, then we know that. There's not a lot of those guys out of Europe, but there's some, and we can see it. I think Dame Sarr would have been one.
Yeah.
But if we watch a guy that's not overly athletic, but he can get there, I'm just going to keep it in the back of my mind and say, okay, I just don't know how that relates to the college game. Like I said, is he skilled? Absolutely. That relates. Can he shoot the ball? Absolutely. That relates. Has he been well schooled and coached? Have the fundamentals? Absolutely. A good basketball IQ? Absolutely. But I'm going to hold the bid as far as being just able to break down defenders and get to the rim.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold that check.
I'm with you 100%. My point more was that's in his mental bag. And that's how he sees the game. That's how he's comfortable playing the game. Whether that translates or not, like you're saying, we'll have to wait and see. I think certain aspects do. I think being able to create a shot on the perimeter using a screen, that will translate. I think his ability to come off screens, he comes off a lot of low screens, pops out, and he's not just a shoot guy. He can kick the ball to somebody. Those are things that will be there at the college level. But the fact that in his game over there, he does a lot of stuff, that's something we haven't seen yet from Powell or from Jonathan Powell or Jaron Stevenson. So perhaps it translates to a degree at UNC, or maybe it doesn't, but at least we've seen a guy that thinks the game on that level.
At least we know this. I think this is a good way to put it. North Carolina needed a guy who at least could be capable of that.
Yeah.
So I would, to have somebody and say, well, it remains to be seen is much better than to have somebody say, no, he can't.
Yeah,
because, and like you said, when you're looking at the lineup next year, obviously at that 3 spot, that was something that they needed to have, especially if you have Trimble at the 2, who is going to be more that guy who we know can get to the rim, but teams are not necessarily going to try to run him off the 3-point line because they're in fear of him knocking down 10 threes. So it's actually a pretty good compliment, I think, at the 2 spot and the 3 spot. And like you said, to have somebody that's capable of being able to do that, if it does translate, and I think there's going to be a lot of things in his game translate, but if everything translates, then that's very good for North Carolina.
Well, let me ask you one other thing about his game before we go into a few other things. I know they're just highlights. I haven't watched full games yet, but often you see him on the ball at the top. Now, one of the questions about this year's team is, do they have a guy Huber could put the ball in his hands in a shot clock situation, and can he make something happen? Not just score. I think Kyan Evans could probably put the ball in the basket some, but can he find somebody else? For example, Duke didn't have that in Sion James, and that's why they had to go to Cooper Flagg to try to make something happen in clearouts in some of those late in some of those losses. And there's a lot of chatter from Carolina people I talked to that they'll be in the same situation because Kyan Evans hasn't proven he can be a distributor in that sense. I'm not saying that Bogavac can be a distributor, but it looks like there is a history of him being on top in some situations where he can find somebody, and his ability to shoot and also shoot off the dribble might put him in a situation where he could be the guy on the ball in a shot clock situation with Trimble on this side and Evans on that side. How do you see that possibly playing out?
You better have somebody, if you're going to give them the ball with 10 seconds left, that can more than get past the ball. They've got to be able to finish.
Yeah.
So if they can't finish, the shot and pass is not going to be there because you've got to draw help. So, yeah, that is a good point, because you look at the perimeter that they had and you just said, who's the guy? Yeah. And here's the thing with that team. compared to last year's. I made this statement. RJ Davis, people don't realize how hard it's going to be to replace him, because as bad as last year was, think about how bad it would have been without RJ. And I understand that there was so much expectations. I would have people sending me DMs. They would say, I wish you would have never come back. And it just hurts to take. And it was ridiculous. And I'm like, if you don't have RJ Davis, I don't know if that team could have scored 50, because he just so many big shots, and he made the defense respect him. And where else were they going to get it on the perimeter? So you look at who they lost and what they brought in, and RJ being a big piece, and then you lose Ian Jackson, and Cadeau always had it in his hands, and then you was thinking, well, maybe it's Drake Powell. And you got to think about this. They're looking to make the addition. This is kind of the response of Drake Powell leaving. So, Drake might have been that guy next year, or Ian Jackson might have been that guy. So I kind of look at it and say, what are you getting when you replace Drake Powell with Luka?
Yeah.
What do you have? So I think obviously it's not going to be nearly as athletic, but you're looking at a guy who is a different player, but's very skilled, and may be able, with a capital M-A-Y, may be able to put the ball in a hole a little bit better, and be more of a guy who could be on the ball and score a little bit. And there's obviously things he's not even close to Drake, or Drake wouldn't have stayed in the draft and is going to be as high as he is, just the sheer athleticism with God-given talents. But then you get into the North Carolina offense, and it gets stagnant when you've got one guy basically on the ball late and even throughout, and it's just you're not getting anything off those. Do you have guys, multiple guys who can go on the ball and come off the screen and do that? Or if he's a shooter, are you going to run him off the ball, off screen? So, he's going to have to, he being Hubert Davis, he'll have to decide what's he going to do and how's he going to use these guys together. It's just so new right now. The whole roster's new.
Yep.
He's just picking up a guy today that we don't, honestly, I'm not going to lie about it. I don't know a ton about, trying to find out stuff about. So, man, it's got a whole new feel to it.
It's got a whole new feel to it, but they had another guy with experience. So they added a bunch of guys that have played. Stevenson started 23 games for Alabama, and everybody else has averaged 8 points a game or above, I believe is what it is. So more experience, more guys that have been around. I think these are dudes, given what they want to achieve, it should be a coachable unit for Hubert. And I think bringing this guy in should only add to that. He's not coming over to the United States because he wants to check out beaches in North Carolina. There's a whole mission to what he's doing here. I will add this much. I didn't get to see really anything about him playing defense, a little bit, but I don't know what to expect from him defensively. If you're talking about a swap for Drake Powell, obviously it'd be very challenging to imagine him being anywhere near on Drake's level defensively. But I think Hubert and the staff understand that they have upgraded defensively. There's no doubt about that. So maybe you can have a guy out there who might not be a B-plus defender if he can get you some buckets and helps keep defenses honest, if you've got a bunch of other high-grade defenders like Evans is and like Trimble is and like Stevenson is and like Vasar is. So I think that is something to consider as well, that if they had a throwaway spot for a so-so defender, this was the kind of guy that would fit in, and they had room there because they brought in so many other A-plus defenders.
You're such an optimist.
I'm not an optimist. I'm just trying to look at the potential upside and thinking that might go on. I mean, I don't really, you know me, it doesn't matter one way or the other to me, but I think fans want to know what potential upsides there are. I mean, he could be a terrible defensive player. We haven't seen it. I got to watch some games. How can he defend a driving wing in the ACC? Imagine some of the guys in college basketball this past year. Could he defend a Jameer Watkins? I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I do know that what this does open up is a little bit of a question mark about who starts that four. Does Jaron Stevenson come in for the money that they're paying him with 2 years left, being a local guy, and come off the bench? Or does Caleb Wilson, who's making twice as much money as the ballyhooed freshman, come off the bench? You know, Hubert's got a little PR stuff there with how he uses five-star players. So there's a little bit of a question mark about how that plays out now that Luka comes in. Without him, you could see Stevenson starting at the 3 and Wilson starting at the 4, and that's not an issue. Now there might be some interesting conversations that have to take place for Hubert eventually.
Well, we know Caleb Wilson didn't come to North Carolina to sit.
No.
So,
well, exactly.
And Stevenson did come off the bench at Alabama. But I think early on, excuse me, Luka's probably, if he pans out, probably your guy at the 3. This is just an opinion. It's like a certain body part. Everybody's got one. I think, and the reason being, I think you need some guys who can loosen up the opponent's defense a little bit, and him being able to shoot. I think we'd all agree with what we know right now. He's going to be a little bit more of an offensive weapon than Jaron. And Jaron brings a certain aspect, and it really starts defensively with him.
Yeah.
And I think Jaron's at his best when he plays the 3. At his length and his size, he can guard any perimeter in the country. And that's really big. So I think there's ways that you could use. And look, we've spoken about the 3. Now, Trimble's going to start at the 2, in my opinion. But you have some options there. And moving Luka to 2, once you make your rotations, playing Jaron at the 3, playing Caleb at the 4, and then moving Jaron to the 4, and then making so you actually have 2 different spots that you can play Jaron. I think you've got 2 different spots you can play Luka. So I think 2 through 4, the team's pretty versatile.
Yeah.
Now I think they're set at the 1, and they're set at the 5. But 2 through 4, you can do a lot of mixing and matching. If you want offense, you can do that. If you absolutely want a lockdown defensive unit, you can do that by playing Caleb at the 4, Jaron Stevenson at the 3, and then playing Trimble at the 2, and you can just destroy people in that area. Now, I think Luka probably matches up better here because whether or not, I don't think he's going to be the strongest defender, but I've heard a lot of people say, even before this edition, a lot of basketball people nationally, that this does look like Hubert's best defensive lineup, best defensive roster that he's had going into year number 5 at North Carolina. So if you have one guy out there on the floor that's not Dennis Rodman, that's okay.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. Now, the optimism, how high should it be for Carolina fans since a lot of them are penciling this guy in right now? How optimistic should they be that he will end up in Chapel Hill? There are some questions about admissions when you're talking about European players, and certainly North Carolina, which has stricter admissions than some others. And also secondary, and we'll talk about this last, are the financials worked out with him? How much do we know about the financials here?
Well, I know nothing about the financials right now. And
let me jump in. We do know that there was $700,000 left in the collective, as we've been saying for a long time. Other money can be used for players from donors. That has been something we've discussed about multiple times. Too many people, unfortunately, have misunderstood when we say there's 700 left in the collective. That's all they can spend. That's not the case. You and I were texting about Kentucky. I think it was yesterday. Obviously, they've spent more that's in their collective. Carolina has been prepared to in a couple of occasions. I would imagine this is one of those occasions as well.
Well, I was told a couple of weeks ago. Now you remember too when we said this, unless when we said about the money, unless somebody steps up in the future and adds money into this, some booster, most likely. And we were told a couple of weeks ago that has probably happened because they were willing to spend a little bit. If they were waiting on Watkins and some guys to come out of the portal, and they had some money to spend there. So I think there was some money added at the last, because they knew, I think people around the program knew that as it was, that the roster was lacking. They had to have another player.
Yeah.
So I believe there was some, but as far as the money that he's going to be getting, I don't know. But like I told you yesterday, the quote I was given, and until this new money situation, the way the NCAA is going to do it, that right now everybody's spending like drunken sailors. And I've taken more kickback from this probably than anything that I've done when I said that Kentucky, just to give you an example, I believe their roster is upward of $20 million. And people are like, especially on that side, just lost their minds. And, you know, they think, the flat earthers think that you can do this and spend $500,000. Well, we're going to give him $500,000. We can get a really good guy for that. I mean, the only two people they could get to play for $500,000 to be me and you. So I've got a friend who I've known for years. Outside of, I knew him from another way besides just sports and doing this, but he's an athletic director now at a Division I school, a mid-major here in the Southeast, and they lost a player in the portal who didn't play a whole lot for them, who went to a Southeastern Conference school, and his mind was blown by the money that this young man's getting, and he said he's not even blows his mind. He's really not worth close that. But you've got teams spending so much money, and you think about it. It's how many of these guys are going for $2 and $3 million? Well, you get a couple of them on your rosters, you're 3 guys in, you spent $8 to $10 million.
Yeah.
And then you're still trying to work the rest of these guys in who are not going to come cheap. So it takes people and I was surprised. I had a guy ask me earlier in the year, how many teams are going to spend $10 million? And I'm like, man, nobody's going to spend $10 million. Now, this was back in February. And man, I've been more wrong about that than anything that's ever come out of my mouth. And I look now, $10 million, I won't even get you a date. You know,
Carolina's at around 10.3 right now with its roster.
Oh, it's. I mean, how many of these teams are way up in the teens? And you look at football. I mean, I know the collectives involved with this, but everybody was flabbergasted last year. Well, how many times did you hear it? Well, it was Ohio State's $22 million football roster. Texas is spending 45 this year.
I remember 3 years ago, David, 3 years ago, and this is all relevant to the conversation here because of where the money's going. But 3 years ago, I remember sitting and talking with Mac Brown, who said, boy, if we could ever get to 7 million, we'll be in great shape. That was 3 years ago. And 7 million, you're not even trying now.
Yeah. That won't get you a quarterback that went to Michigan.
No, Duke paid $8 million for 2 years for Tulane's quarterback. That's $4 million right there a year.
Yeah. So the money, there's so much money that has to be spent. So we don't know about that. Now, that to me, that's not the huge issue. That whatever they got worked out, they got worked out. The big thing is going to be eligibility from two ways, through the NCAA and through the admissions department at the University of North Carolina. The thing that we're seeing, and I started running with this on the board Friday in our Four Corners message board, felt very, very positive that this was going to happen, that they were going to get Luka. The bigger question mark is going to be his eligibility. And there's a lot of this going on right now with NIL, Europeans more than ever. They're coming over here. but the whole academic part of it, are they eligible? Number one, these guys start playing very, very young professionally. They got agents when they don't go to school and play high school like they do in the United States. They are part of professional programs. So I find it hard to believe that anybody's breached the eligibility standards that differentiate an amateur from a pro. There are no amateurs now. So I would have a very hard time seeing anything that anybody has done. I think LeBron James could come back as an amateur the way things are set up now. But that's one issue. But the other is going to be the academic part of it. Are they eligible? Do they meet everything that needs to be done? And that is what across the board they're running into. DeRidder at Virginia is the example that I've used. And you see it a lot of times, especially at schools that have these standards. Once you get into that, the public Ivies, Michigan, Virginia, North Carolina, there's a reason North Carolina has struggled getting players out of Europe. It's been the academic issues. And Virginia, obviously, big-time academic school. Michigan, how many guys do they get in the transfer portal from other schools? They end up getting big-time players. They can't get them in. So there's going to be – that's the next battle. And to me, that was probably a bigger hurdle than North Carolina getting a commitment from him, because they were the only school that really I saw that was mentioned big time. We don't know exactly who all was in. So there's going to be an issue of trying to get him eligible.
Yeah, the NCAA hurdle is one thing. The UNC hurdle is another. Maybe Hubert could just ask Bill Belichick to pull a favor or two. Yeah. Since he's had a little success there, getting some of those things bent a little bit, which also Mac Brown spoke about quite a bit. So what are your thoughts overall? Let's say Luka clears everything. How much more whole does he make this team? And Jacob and I did a drop the other day. We were perusing the landscape, and a lot of people are now putting out the next wave of early projections for the top 25 now that most rosters are either complete or nearly complete. And Carolina was in one and they were 24th. They're not even close in a lot of them. So what does this do to that? Does this become a team that might have a chance to be significantly better than people figured 5 days ago?
You read my mind, because I was going to say I want to wait and see what these individuals that have studied every team who make these top 25 projections. There's some people out there very qualified to do it. They just sit in the dark room all day long and look at everybody's rosters. So I've not done that. I know some teams that I think are going to be good, but across the board, I don't know. But now you look at several teams, Auburn, Alabama, some of those have had huge additions this week with players coming back. Yep. Auburn got their own big European player this week, and then Pettiford comes back, and Alabama has
Florida
coming back.
Florida and also getting Boogie Fland.
Yeah. So so you're going, Florida. So you're looking at teams still, even though it's we're getting down to the midnight hour of it, where there's not going to be as much of it. There was still some fluidity this week, and I'm interested to see. It can't hurt them. I would think that they would probably end up in some top 20s. I don't think it's going to put them in the top 10. I don't think you're going to look up tomorrow morning and North Carolina's ESPN's got them preseason number 3. But I think they could get inside the top 20. Now, it brings me to one thing here about next year. I think there's 2 things to keep in mind on. Number one, I do think the ACC is going to be better quickly because of the coaching changes that have come in. I think Will Wade is automatically going to make North Carolina State better. I think Miami, I know they've been good the last few years, so I'm not going to say they're going to be better than what they have been the last few years, better than what they were last year. They were so bad. I think Florida State's got a chance to be better, but North Carolina State, Miami are the 2 that I think are going to be better long term. And I think Louisville
Louisville's
is
top
getting
10.
ready to be really, really, really good.
Yeah. I think Virginia's going to be better. I think Ryan Odom's a good coach. He's not Tony Bennett. There'll be a departure. They've made some moves. Syracuse is adding a couple freshmen, and it'll be a make or break year up there for Red Autry. But I agree with you. I think NC State's going to be really good. I think Clemson is still in really good shape. And I guess they're still waiting to hear about Jaden Zachary, which would be fantastic for them. I agree. Miami's going to be a lot better. Duke's going to be Duke. I don't think Virginia Tech or Notre Dame or any of those teams, they don't play Boston College next year. I don't think that those teams are going to be issues at all. But I agree the league's going to be better. And this team, I think having another older guy that they add might help them be better out of the gate. They need to be, because Carolina's schedule is not as strong.
That's my other part.
They're going to they've only got a handful of games that can help them with their net. And Michigan State and Fort Myers is a must-win game because they have to go to an SEC school. Playing Ohio State in the CBS Sports Classic, it might be a wash because there's a really good chance that's not going to be a quad one game, and then Georgetown at home. So they have to win. They have to beat Michigan State on Thanksgiving Day in Fort Myers, Florida. And being an older team going into that, and there was a lot of changeover at Michigan State's roster, by the way, they might be better situated to get one of those early wins so they can quiet the conversation about the quad one crap.
I think they're better off with a schedule because I like hard schedules, but I thought last year was brutal.
Too much. It was too hard.
Before I thought it was a tough schedule on two parts. Number one, preseason, you go to Maui and you just play a 4-game gauntlet. And then you turn around and you've got Alabama in the ACC, SEC after you leave that. And then you're hoping, you play in Charlotte in the jump man. You should have got Georgetown. You end up getting a national champion. So you've got a 6-game run there with what they had. I thought Auburn, Alabama, Florida were 3 of the 6 best teams in the country, maybe 3 of the best 5. Nobody knew Michigan State was going to be as good as what they were. And I just thought it was very, very tough. So then you get into the ACC, and outside of playing Duke, there's another team. There's 4 of the best 6 who you get 3 times. You don't have anybody else on the schedule with the exception of Clemson that can help you. So I think
Louisville, and they lost both.
I think next year you've got – it's not as hard early on. You can build momentum. Let's face, I think what they played in all those early losses, I just think it broke them, and they couldn't recover. So next year, you don't run into that. It's more spaced out. It's more spaced out outside the ACC. And then I think once you get into the league, you may have more games. I'm going to kick back right there. I think you may have more games. I think North Carolina State could help. I think Pitt could help. I think Clemson, Duke, Louisville, obviously. I think next year you may end up having 6 or 7 teams that you play that could actually help you and end up being, quad one type games. So those
are also teams that you would meet in the ACC tournament. They had to get to the semifinals of the ACC tournament to win a game that would really help them much, because beating Wake Forest on a neutral floor didn't really help them. So I agree with you on that. I do like the idea of having more winnable games, but there's a lot of pressure to get some non-conference quad one games, and there aren't as many opportunities. So they got to beat Michigan State.
Well, I still look. Let's say North Carolina State, and I know North Carolina fans don't want to pull for North Carolina State, but it's gotten to the point now, I think I tell everybody, you need to pull for your rivals, not against you, but against other teams to be good. But so I would want North, if I'm a Tar Heel fan, I'd hold my nose and want them to be good. But North Carolina State's not going to be as good as Auburn. And so that's what I'm trying to say.
They got to go to State. They don't host them.
It may not be as brutal. And Miami, could they work their way up? Well, if they do, that's great. But they're not going to be as good as Alabama.
Yeah.
And Pitt's not going to be as good as Florida. So that's kind of where you're.
Yeah, what you're saying is, and I actually had a conversation with somebody about this the other day. They brought it up that last year their quad one games were top 10, top 15. This year, a lot of their quad one games may be in the neutral site in the 35 or 40 range, on the road against a team that could be. They had a quad one win at Pitt last year. If they would have won that game, because Pitt was in the 60s and Pitt did well early on, they stayed there. So you could have quad one opportunities on the road against teams that are 40s and 50s that can really help you. And that's how some of the Mountain West Conference teams get 5 and 6, because they win at Nevada. They win at Colorado State, and that's a lot different than what you're talking about, beating Auburn and Alabama. And heck, they had Auburn and Michigan State back-to-back days, and 5 days later they get Alabama. Nobody's going to go through that. And then you get Florida a week and a half after that. So I hear exactly what you're saying. We'll have to wait and see. I do think that—
Glad you can hear me. Did you like the way I maneuvered? I had a lot more.
I did, and I saw the North Alabama shirt. That's impressive.
Yeah.
People don't think about—
my daughter. That's where my daughter graduated. My daughter graduated.
Yeah, I know. And you're not too far from there, but around here, people don't think too much about North Alabama. So, it used to have a great, Division II football program?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure did.
I guess, I don't know what they are now, so we don't really think much about it. I know they're Division I in basketball now.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, they almost got to the tournament last year. Lipscomb beat them. They almost got it.
David Sisk in his cheering section for North Alabama. That would have been a sight to behold. All right, my friend, Luka Bogavac, the most recent addition to North Carolina. If he clears admissions, we will be on top of this. I don't really know what the timetable is for that, but it should be pretty soon, because they want to get him here.
You hope it is. You hope
get him enrolled in summer school.
That's a whole other thing. I mean, how many times have you seen in the past schools are put on hold forever?
Yeah.
And it was like, tell us something. Even if it's bad news, tell us, because it just goes on forever.
Well, he's got to play with the guys. So, and they've already, I think the football players showed up here a few days ago. Basketball, I think, shows up this coming week. So, in summer classes are going to be underway. So, we got to get rolling, got to mesh and see how all that works. And he's going to have to get acclimated. It's going to be a pretty big transition. I guess Henry Vasar being there will help. In that sense, he'll be able to help kind of guide him along a little bit. But anyway, any other thoughts, David, before we sign off on a 38-minute commitment pod?
I don't. I think we've covered it all.
All right. I'm AJ. He's David. Thanks for stopping by.